In the fading twilight of Willow Creek, a speck of a town nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York where the maple trees whispered secrets to the wind and the river ran like a vein of silver through the heart of Main Street, Eleanor Hayes stood frozen at the edge of the old wooden bridge. The rain had come sudden and fierce that evening, turning the dirt roads to mud and the sky to a bruised purple. Her boots sank into the soft earth, and her heart, oh, her heart, pounded like the thunder rolling in from the Adirondacks. Behind her, the town lights flickered like hesitant fireflies, but ahead, across the swollen creek, two figures waited in the downpour, brothers, bound by blood and torn by love. Jack Harlan, with his broad shoulders and easy laugh that could coax a smile from the sternest librarian, and Tommy Harlan, lean and quiet, his eyes holding the depth of the forests that framed their childhood home. "Which of the two of us do you choose?" Jack had called out earlier that day, his voice cracking over the phone like dry timber. Now, as the storm raged, the question hung heavier than the clouds, a dagger poised over the soul of Willow Creek. For in choosing one, Eleanor knew she would shatter the other, and with them, the fragile tapestry of a community that had weathered depressions, wars, and whispers of abandonment. But love, that wild and reckless force, had never been kind to small towns. Eleanor had come to Willow Creek 20 years ago, a wide-eyed girl from the bustle of Buffalo, fleeing a marriage that crumbled like autumn leaves underfoot. She was 25 then, with auburn hair that caught the sun like polished copper and a laugh that echoed through the valleys. The town had embraced her like a long-lost daughter, old Mrs. Whitaker teaching her to bake apple pies with cinnamon just shy of too much, the mill workers sharing stories of the river's moods over lukewarm coffee at the diner. But it was the Harlans who truly anchored her. Jack and Tommy's father, Old Man Harlan, had owned the sawmill that kept half the town employed, and their mother, Grace, ran the library with a gentleness that masked her steel spine. The boys were as different as dawn and dusk. Jack, the elder by 2 years, with his charisma that filled rooms and his dreams of expanding the mill into something grand, a beacon for outsiders to flock to Willow Creek and breathe new life into its sagging porches. Tommy, though, was the quiet guardian, the one who fixed the creek bridge after floods, planted saplings where the logging had scarred the earth, and volunteered at the food pantry without fanfare, his hands calloused not from ambition but from care. Their love for Eleanor bloomed slow, like the wildflowers along the riverbank in spring. It started with shared suppers at Grace's table, where laughter flowed freer than the cider, and walks under starlit skies where the air smelled of pine and possibility. Jack courted her with grand gestures, a bouquet of roses pilfered from the county fair, a promise to build her a house with a wraparound porch overlooking the hills. He spoke of futures painted in bold strokes, festivals to rival those in Saratoga, jobs that would keep the young from fleeing to the cities. Tommy's affection was subtler, woven into the fabric of daily life, a mended fence on her rented farm, a note slipped into her mailbox quoting Frost, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. Eleanor, with her artist's soul and a heart scarred by betrayal, found solace in both. Jack ignited her dreams, Tommy mended her wounds. For years, she danced on the edge, telling herself it was harmless, that in a town this small, love could stretch to cover more than one heart. But whispers turned to murmurs, and murmurs to fractures. Neighbors chose sides at the general store, the loggers with Jack, dreaming of prosperity, the elders with Tommy, valuing the roots that held them steady. The rift deepened last summer, when the mill's machinery groaned its last and layoffs rippled through Willow Creek like stones skipped across the river. Jack blamed the unions, Tommy the unchecked greed of expansion. Fists flew in the parking lot one humid night, blood mixing with sawdust under the floodlights. Eleanor pulled them apart, her dress torn and her voice raw, but the damage was done. The town split, potlucks became segregated affairs, the annual harvest fair saw separate booths, and children parroted their parents' loyalties on the playground. "Jack's gonna save us," the mill kids would say. "Tommy's the real hero," the farmers countered. Grace, confined to a wheelchair by arthritis that twisted her fingers like gnarled branches, watched from her window with tears carving paths down her weathered cheeks. "My boys," she'd murmur to Eleanor over tea, "they were inseparable once. What have we become?" Eleanor had no answer, only the ache of knowing her indecision had fanned the flames. She loved them both, fiercely and without measure, but love, she learned, was a mirror that reflected not just joy but the shadows of selfishness lurking within. As autumn painted the leaves in fire and gold, the storm of that October evening brewed not just in the skies but in the Harlan kitchen, where Grace had called them all together one last time. The air was thick with the scent of stewing apples and unspoken regrets. Grace's voice, frail but unyielding, cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "I'm dying, my dears," she said, her hands folded in her lap like a prayer. Cancer, the doctor confirmed later, a shadow creeping through her lungs, fed by years of milled dust and unspoken sorrows. She had months, perhaps weeks. "And before I go, I need to know peace. Eleanor, child, you've been the light in this house since the day you arrived. But my sons, they tear at each other like wolves over a bone. Tonight, you choose. Which of the two of us do you choose?" Her eyes, sharp as the river's edge, held Eleanor's gaze. The room fell silent, save for the tick of the grandfather clock and the distant rumble of thunder. Jack's jaw tightened, his blue eyes stormy, Tommy's shoulders slumped, his green ones veiled in quiet resignation. Eleanor felt the world tilt, the floorboards creaking under the weight of expectation. This was no mere lover's quarrel, it was the unraveling of a legacy, the splintering of a town that had endured because its people chose unity over pride. She fled into the rain, her coat forgotten, the Harlan pickup's headlights cutting through the deluge as Jack and Tommy followed, their voices lost to the gale. Now, on the bridge, the creek roared below like an angry beast, swollen from days of relentless downpour. The structure, Tommy's handiwork from last spring, beams reinforced with his sweat and stories from his grandfather, groaned under the assault. Eleanor gripped the railing, slick with water, her mind a whirlwind of memories, Jack teaching her to dance at the county barn raising, his arms strong and sure, Tommy reading poetry by lantern light during blackouts, his voice a balm against the dark. How could she choose? To pick Jack would betray the boy who had bandaged her knee after a fall from the hayloft, who saw the world's beauty in the small things. To pick Tommy would wound the man who had carried her father's coffin through the mud when grief had buckled her legs, who dreamed not of conquest but of harmony. And Grace, dear, fierce Grace, lay waiting for an answer that might buy her peace but cost the town its soul. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the brothers' faces, Jack's etched with desperation, Tommy's with a sorrow that seemed to age him a decade in an instant. "Ellie, please," Jack shouted over the wind, stepping closer, his hand outstretched. "I can give you everything, a life bigger than this town, kids running through fields we own, not rent. Tommy, he clings to the past like it's a lifeline. Willow Creek is dying, and so are we if we don't fight for more." His words, once charming, now rang hollow, laced with the ambition that had driven wedges between friends at the diner. Tommy, silent until then, moved to her other side, his voice steady as the earth. "He's right about one thing, Elle. The town's hurting. But fighting for more by tearing down what's good. That's not life, that's just noise. I love you because you see the good in the quiet places, the way the river sings at dawn, the way neighbors share a burden without tally. Choose me, and I'll spend every day making sure this town remembers how to hold on, not let go." The bridge shuddered then, a deep, ominous creak that vibrated through Eleanor's bones. She glanced down, heart seizing as she saw the far support post, Tommy's pride, carved with initials from their youth, leaning perilously, undermined by the flood's fury. Another bolt of lightning, and a crack split the air, wood splintering like bone. The railing gave way beneath Jack's foot, he teetered, arms flailing, a cry escaping his lips that pierced the storm. Time slowed, the raindrops hanging like jewels in the air. Tommy lunged, his body a blur, grabbing Jack's wrist with both hands, muscles straining against the pull of the current below. "Hold on." Tommy bellowed, his face contorted in effort, rain streaming into his eyes. Jack dangled, feet kicking wildly, the creek's maw yawning hungrily. Eleanor screamed, scrambling to help, but the bridge bucked again, sending her sprawling. Tommy lunged without hesitation, his body a blur of instinct and brotherhood, grabbing Jack's wrist with both hands as the railing gave way completely. Muscles strained against the inexorable pull of the current below, the creek's maw yawning wide with foam-flecked teeth. "Hold on, damn it!" Tommy bellowed, rain streaming into his eyes, blurring his vision but not his resolve. Jack dangled precariously, feet kicking wildly at the void, his face a mask of terror that stripped away the bravado, revealing the boy who had once clung to Tommy during childhood thunderstorms. Eleanor screamed, a primal sound lost to the gale, scrambling forward on hands and knees, her fingers clawing into the slick planks for purchase. The bridge bucked again, a violent heave that sent splinters flying like shrapnel, but in that suspended chaos, a profound realization unfurled in her chest like a flower at the touch of dawn's first light. This was the choice, not between two hearts, but between hatred's fracture and healing's weave. The love that had threatened to tear Willow Creek asunder wasn't hers alone to bear, it was the brothers', twisted by fear into rivalry's sharp thorns. Jack's ambition, born of a terror that the town his father built would fade into irrelevance, Tommy's caution, rooted in a dread of losing the soul of the place that had shaped them. And in this thunderous instant, as lightning etched their silhouettes against the bruised sky, Eleanor saw the truth etched clear. Selflessness lay not in claiming one path, but in forging a third, refusing to let any soul plummet into the abyss. Love, true and transformative, demanded they all rise or none at all. Adrenaline surged through her veins like liquid fire, propelling her forward despite the terror knotting her gut. "Jack, reach for me, now," she cried, extending her arm alongside Tommy's, her voice a lifeline thrown into the dark. But Jack's grip, slick with mud and desperation, began to slip, his fingers scraping futilely against Tommy's rain-sodden sleeve. He plummeted an inch, then two, the current's roar mocking their fragility. "No!" Tommy twisted his body with a guttural growl, wrapping his free arm around the nearest support beam, anchoring himself like the very roots he championed. His face contorted in agony, veins bulging in his neck like rivers in flood, every fiber of his being screaming protest against the strain. "I won't let go," he roared, the words torn from a place deeper than pain. The cost came swift, a sharp, sickening snap echoed over the storm, his shoulder dislocating with a pop that made Eleanor's stomach lurch. She gasped, tasting bile, but Tommy held, unyielding as the hills themselves, his body the unbreakable bridge between life and loss. Inch by tortuous inch, they hauled Jack upward, Eleanor's free hand finding his collar, pulling with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Jack's boots scraped against the splintered edge, finding purchase at last, and with a final, collective heave, he tumbled over the lip, the three of them collapsing in a tangled heap amid the groaning timbers. Gasping for air, soaked to the bone, they lay there as the storm's fury crested and began to wane, the bridge holding by the slender threads of Tommy's craftsmanship and the raw wool of human bonds unbroken. The rain eased to a mournful drizzle as the world righted itself, the creek's roar softening to a grumble. Eleanor rose first, her limbs trembling from exertion and release, helping Jack to his feet with hands that shook like aspen leaves. He stood pale and unsteady, the golden boy humbled, his eyes wide with the ghost of what might have been. She turned then to Tommy, who cradled his limp arm against his chest, the joint swollen and angry red beneath his torn shirt. You saved him," she whispered, tears carving hot paths down her rain-streaked cheeks, mingling with the remnants of the deluge. Tommy winced as he shifted, but a crooked smile tugged at his split lip, the pain in his eyes softened by something luminous. "He's my brother, blood's thicker than any flood. The town's family too, can't pick sides when the water's rising for us all." Jack stared at Tommy, the fire of rivalry doused by the cold slap of mortality, his broad frame seeming smaller in the aftermath. "Tommy. God, man, I thought that was it," he choked out, his voice breaking like the railing had. For the first time since their boyhood forts in the woods, the ambitious elder knelt in the mud, heedless of the chill seeping into his knees, and pulled his brother into a fierce, bone-crushing embrace. Tommy hissed at the jolt to his shoulder, but he leaned in, clapping Jack's back with his good hand, the rain washing away the salt of old wounds. "I'm sorry," Jack murmured into the crook of Tommy's neck, the words muffled but sincere, a dam breaking after years of drought. "For the mill fights, the barbs at family dinner, pushing you away like you were the enemy. I was so damn scared we'd lose it all, the legacy, the life Dad built, that I forgot what we already had. You. Us." In the hush that followed, as the first hesitant stars pricked the clearing sky, Eleanor wrapped her arms around them both, a circle forged in Storm's forge. No words passed, none needed, the choice had been made not with lips but with lives pulled from the brink. They stumbled back to the Harlan house together, Jack supporting Tommy's weight, Eleanor scouting the path with a flashlight scavenged from the pickup. Grace waited on the porch, her wheelchair silhouetted against the warm glow spilling from the kitchen window, a shawl draped over her frail shoulders. Her eyes, ever perceptive, took in the scene, the brothers' linked arms, Eleanor's tear-bright face, and a soft smile curved her lips, peace settling over her features like the calm after rain. "You chose," she said simply, no question in her tone, only quiet knowing. Word of the bridge's near catastrophe spread through Willow Creek faster than the floodwaters themselves, carried on the wings of early morning calls and texts that lit up dormant phones. By dawn, as the sun pierced the clouds in shafts of reluctant gold, the town mobilized with the instinctive unity of survivors. Mill workers arrived with coils of rope and pulleys slung over shoulders, their faces etched with the shared pallor of what-ifs. Farmers hauled sandbags in battered trucks, their wives packing thermoses of hot coffee laced with whiskey for warmth. Even Widow Jenkins, the reclusive soul who hadn't ventured beyond her porch in a decade since her husband's passing in the last flood, wheeled herself down the lane, a basket of knitted scarves in her lap as offerings to the chill. The air hummed with purpose, the mud sucking at boots but yielding to determination. Eleanor stood at the epicenter, no longer the divider but the bridge incarnate, her voice carrying over the murmurs like a clarion call amplified by the love swelling in her chest. "We came so close to losing everything last night," she addressed the gathering, her words steady despite the rawness in her throat. "Not just Jack to the creek, but all of us, to the rifts we've let widen, the sides we've drawn in the dirt like lines in sand. This town, our Willow Creek, has been ripping itself apart over choices we thought were simple, ours alone. But what if we chose differently? What if, instead of picking teams, we picked each other? Kindness over grudge, selflessness over self, humanity's quiet power over pride's loud roar." The unexpected turn came not from the heavens' wrath, but from the hearts it had laid bare like roots after erosion. Jack, his arms slung protectively around Tommy's good shoulder, stepped forward into the circle of faces, friends, neighbors, once foes. "The mill's done as it was," he admitted, his voice rough from the night's ordeal but laced with newfound humility. "But maybe that's the gift we needed. Not for profit's sake, but for people's. We repurpose it, workshops for artists like Ellie to teach painting the hills, community gardens like Tommy's always sketched in his notebooks, a hub where hands work together, not against. No more expansions that scar, just spaces that heal." Tommy nodded, his pain a distant echo in the glow of reconciliation, squeezing Jack's arm with a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "And the fair next month? One big table, no booths or banners dividing us. Pies from Mrs. Whitaker, herbs from the farmers, shared, not sectioned." Cheers erupted then, tentative at first like the first birdsong after storm, then swelling to a roar that rivaled the creek at full spate. Mrs. Whitaker passed around hot cider from dented thermoses, the steam carrying cinnamon's promise of better days. Children, freed from their parents' shadows, linked arms and splashed through puddles without a care for whose side they splashed, their laughter a balm on the raw edges. The river, as if sensing the shift, began to recede, revealing smooth stones polished by time's patient hand, reminders that even floods pass, leaving ground firmer for new growth. By midday, the bridge was shored up, ropes and beams lashed in a patchwork of communal sweat, a symbol not of fracture but of fortitude. Winter came gently that year, blanketing Willow Creek in snow that sparkled like scattered diamonds under the street lamps' glow, muting the world to a hush of possibility. Grace slipped away in her sleep one January night, her hand clutching the locket with her son's baby photos, a small